Welcome back to Pixel Project Radio, the video game discussions podcast, where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games and some of yours too. My name is Rick, and today we take a tour to a place many are too afraid to venture, to Celtland in Quest 64. The Quest 64. That's right, Claire Obscure released, and I said, you know what, I think I'd rather play Quest 64 right now. That's what I'd like to do. As always, up top, I've got to say thank you to the patrons. The patrons are a wonderful group of people that keep this train on the tracks and keep things moving. And if you would like to support your favorite local independent artist, that's me, you can do so at patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. You can check out all of the cool things there, even though I didn't enunciate those words as well as I wish I could have. It's not like I can edit this. We'll talk more about... This is off to a great start. We'll talk more about some brief plugs and where you can find us on the internet in a little bit. But first, let's introduce the guest today. You've heard him before on the Games Criticism episode. We've got the one, the only, who else would be here for this episode? Quest 64 official internet celebrity extraordinaire.
Hey, how's it going, Rick? Every time you introduce me like that now, I'm going to be more weirded out than the previous time, but I accept.
That's what I aim to do here. You know, since the show has a rotating panel of guests, I like to keep everybody on their toes. Some people might say you should aim to make a comfortable show. Not me, no. I like to keep everybody, I like to keep the adrenaline pumping. Fight or flight is when the most creative performances come out, right? That's how that goes.
It is.
So, Quest 64 hardly needs an introduction. It was one of the first RPGs on the Nintendo 64 game console. It beat Ocarina of Time, quite notably, by a couple of months, and we're going to talk all about that in a little bit. Players get to take the role of Brian, a master apprentice wizard, as he searches for his father and the fabled L-Tale book. This game has a reputation, and we're going to get into whether or not it's earned, what the misunderstandings and misconceptions are, and of course, we're going to talk about what it could have done better, because this game is a bit of a mixed bag. But it's not the dumpster fire, I think, that the internet would have you believe. But more on that in a little bit. Let's talk about personal histories with this game. You have a particular history with this. It's become kind of your calling card, your brand identity, if we're using corpo speak. From what I understand, one of your favorite games of all time, but don't take my word for it. Let's take your word for it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've come to this game and why it's so special to you?
Yeah. Young Mike was a big video game renter. I did not grow up in a wealthy household, so much like most of the preteens and teens of that generation, we rented tons of games, and my parents were cool enough to get my brother and I a Nintendo 64, but it was like a one game a year kind of situation. They were expensive. And so we rented a lot of games from Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and Captain's Video, which is a pirate-themed video store near me. And Quest 64 was a frequent rental, and my mom is an intelligent and sweet lady, so she watched me rent it over and over and decided eventually that it would be more cost-effective to make that one of the present games of the year, so I could avoid it being a cousin game. It belonged to me, and then I had it for a long time, and it kind of dipped in and out. It's always been my favorite game, or since I could, I had coherent thoughts of games, media, and how I feel about them. I've always loved this game, and some combination of nostalgia and actually playing it and loving it has led me to making it my internet identity too. So here we are, Rick, and here's the game.
A lot of folks that are just passingly familiar with your internet presence, which is a great presence. I mean, it's a shit-posting extraordinaire, might think that it's kind of an irony shtick, right? There's no shortage of that online, so folks would be forgiven for thinking that. But that's not the case. I mean, you grew up with this game, and it's very special to you. How many times, if you had to estimate, how many times have you played through this in your life?
Start to finish, I don't know. I wouldn't, not like a crazy man, not like hundreds and hundreds of times, but it used to be, I have friends that own video game stores, like a couple different friends in my area. And the joke was always that Mike is the only one who likes this game. So every time they got a copy, it would sit on the shelf till I bought it. So the way I would christen it to my collection then would be to beat Mammon. So I had to save on a memory card that was close to the end of the game, and I would beat Mammon. So I've beaten Mammon over 100 times, but playing the whole game, probably a much more pedestrian, less than 100 times.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't want to misrepresent your accomplishments here.
Correct.
And we'll get into who Mammon is and what this game's all about. My history with this is much shorter. I played it for the first time for this show. I had heard of it, of course, but I hadn't known literally anything about it. It is currently the only N64 game that I own CIB, and I do own it CIB, and I've got to say, the box is in almost pristine condition. I keep it in a little protective container, which is nice. But so I played it for the first time, and I was surprised in a few different ways that we'll talk about soon. But first, let's hear the personal histories from the community forum. If you're unfamiliar with the show, the community forum, and by the way, if you're a new listener, welcome. We're happy that you're here. The community forum is a channel in the Discord server where I post what we are talking about on the show, and folks can chime in with their thoughts, feelings, jokes, as long as they're high-quality jokes, and I'll read them on the show. You write it, I read it with great power, etc. And we've got 3 responses here. First up, we've got Matt Stormageddon from the Fun and Games podcast. Matt says this: I loved this game as a kid. It was weird, but so were many other 64 games. I worry about how well it's held up since, and I have yet to do a replay of it, but I'm definitely very nostalgic for it. And I think playing this game as a kid, you know, me having played this as a 32-year-old, I think playing this game as a kid is like the sweet spot. You know, partly because the protagonist, Brian, he's a kid, partly because of the color palette and what's going on in the game. Many reasons. I think this is kind of the perfect summer vacation kid game. I don't know.
No, you're spot on, dude. And it, you know, as a teenager or a young lad, it was also great because it was a story-based game that wasn't, you know, dark. It wasn't gloomy. It filled me with joy. So yeah, summer game is a perfect way to talk about it or to categorize it, I guess. It's a good feeling game.
Speaking of good feelings, Keaton, Poppy the Masked Keaton, is trying to conjure up some good feelings with his community correspondence. Keaton says this: it needs to be on NSO. Collection feels incomplete without it. And you know, I can stand by that. You would think, as infamous as this game is, as many people know it, you'd think they'd add it. I'm for it. I hope they do.
I agree.
And last but not least, we've got Mikey Tabletop, Discord regular, former host of 0-2 Heroes Fighting Game Extraordinaire. Mikey sums it up pretty succinctly with this pithy response: Quest 64, more like Best 64. And my understanding, Mike, is that you paid him to say that. Is that true?
How do you know I'm not Mikey Tabletop?
Ah, fuck, that's right. Shit, shut it down. Shut it down, boys. Let's talk about some of the development history of this game. Some facts and figures first. This is a rare occurrence. This was released in North America first. Rare as in the frequency, not the company. In June of 98, it came to the EU that following September, and Japan got it July after that. They got a different version, which we'll get into soon. The full credits, as I always say, are on the wiki, the IMDb, or the credits of the game. Play the thing. But of note, the developer, it's a Japanese company, Imagineer, published, now this is interesting, it's published in North America by THQ, Konami in the EU, and Imagineer in Japan. 4 directors on this one, 4 of them. Ichinori Hanma, Atsushi Osuga, Yasushi Kamigai, and, I forgot punctuation, and Tomokazu Hattori. Produced by Osuga and Koichiro Sakurai. Writing by Tomoko Suzuki, and composition by Masamichi Amano. Got some more stuff to say about the OST here in a little bit. The Japanese title for this is much better, and it's L-Tail Monsters. And my understanding, too, when reading up on how this game came to be, is that the original title was Holy Magic Century. Which, I mean, both of those are just such better titles than Quest 64. I don't have any nostalgia for this system. I never had one growing up. So the naming convention of putting 64 after everything, it doesn't have a positive response for me. You know, I feel those titles they're cute, but they're always kind of clunky to me. I don't know. I was going to say that's a personal failing, but that's not exactly how nostalgia works. But what about you? I mean, sure, you agree, right? You agree that L-Tail Monsters and Holy Magic Century is a little better title?
Yeah. I mean, it's not as funny. So, like, slapping 64 on a picture makes a pretty good meme. But you are correct. I prefer both the other titles because Europe still got Holy Magic Century. That's the way Konami published it. And the original title was Holy Magic Century L-Tail, so they were going for all the words then.
I think it's also funny, too, like, you know, Super Mario 64, that's the character's name. You know, that's what it is. Quest is just kind of a generic word. What kind of quest? Well, we don't know. A 64-bit one. That's about all we can say. L-Tail plays into the lore of the game with the L-Tail book. That's sort of the MacGuffin of this game. We'll talk about the story once we get there. And again, for listeners that are new, we won't spoil the story before we start talking about the story. We're going to get through some preliminary discussion first. There's not much to spoil, at least in the released North American version of this game, but in time, we shall come to it. This game, from what I understand, changed a lot over its lifetime. And you can track the timeline and the evolution of this by going back through contemporary magazine articles and reviews, event presentations, things like that. It was a very different game at different times in its evolution. At one point, there were 3 different characters. There was Brian, a protagonist who you could name at one point. There's a character named Nina, who I think was like a white mage archetype.
She also had a sword.
Oh, she had a sword. Okay, paladin, maybe we could say.
Sure.
And a pirate named Cozy. There was also a 5th element. This game deals with 4 elements in Brian's toolkit. And there was originally a 5th one that I think was, what was it, Ether?
Yeah, Ether, and then it was changed to Crystal because the original working title was Crystal Stories, and then it kind of had it didn't have the original, or the Mammon that we had. It was a different baddie named Larva, and they were like black spirit handlers were the baddies. So you kind of had that yin and yang between the light ether and crystal and the black spirits. But, you know, things change.
They do. And that was the thing that I kept coming back to whenever I was playing this game. I mean, I didn't start researching this until a little bit in, like, I want to say 6 hours in or so. That's when I started actually researching into it. And what I kept thinking back to was just this idea of changes. You know, Bowie sang about it. This game changed so much in its lifetime and before it got to the market. And when you factor into that 3 different publishers for 3 different regions, changes were a huge part of this game's DNA, like all throughout. And I did find myself wondering if this propensity toward change, this ever-evolving nature of it, did lead ultimately to what we got. What we ultimately got, and this is just my takeaway. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Mike. We didn't talk about this off mic. This game, I feel like you can feel the scrapped plans all throughout this. It feels like things are missing. It feels like you can feel the ghost of things that should be there, right? The specter of the horses you could ride, of the planned environments that had to be scaled down to the bulk of what this game is, hallways and platforms. You can feel a lot of what should have been there, what was planned to be there, what maybe was there at one point in time but got pulled away. And that was my biggest takeaway from this game, is that, much like the Star Wars prequels, what could have been is kind of casting a shadow over this whole thing.
Yeah, obviously, and once you play the game, or if listeners decide to play it, you'll see that in the last third of the game, which isn't an uncommon thing to happen in RPGs. I'm sure a lot of people have played Xenogears and have seen the difference between the start of the game and the end of the game. The only place you can rush is the ending, and Quest 64 was way worse than the Xeno games were. But I actually became like casual friends with the Prima Guide author James Rakos, and he said that the game, just in the phase where they were trying to write the strategy guide, went through at least 20 plus revisions, and every time they had to start from scratch because their previous saves would stop working. And by the end, he was just kind of, much like the game, he was just trying to get something cohesive on paper for them to sell and make money. But he said it was maddening, and that's his biggest takeaway from Quest 64 was how many different times he had to change his writing and the logistics of the guide for the changes of the game.
Here's one thing that I was thinking too, and listeners, longtime listeners know that like when it comes to gaming history, that's not really my strong suit. But I had wondered this, Ocarina of Time came out a few months after this. This beat it to market by a little bit. But my understanding was that this game was originally planned to release earlier by about a year. And then it got pushed back, and then it got pushed out to market, still feeling a little bit rushed in the hands. And I do wonder if they put it out when they did, rather than holding on to it a bit longer, so they could beat Zelda. Which even at the time, Ocarina wasn't the legendary game that it's become because it didn't exist at the time. But Zelda was still a very well-known name. You still had Link to the Past, which was very successful, and Zelda 1 and 2, obviously. So folks knew Zelda. Excuse me, Princess. Do you think, is there any truth to that?
Yeah, you're spot on. It's 100% what happened. The game was supposed to come out the year before. They figured out that they weren't close to done yet. Pushed the game back like a lot of it happens with a lot of games. But they needed to get to market before what was then Zelda 64, because that's how you name games on the N64. Simply to sell units, they had to get there first. So that's how you went from a delayed game to a truncated development to get it out. They needed that time. They needed those sales before Zelda, dominated the entire market.
And they got out a little bit ahead of it. They got out, I think, 5 months before Ocarina released. But even so, that kind of rushed release, combined with different publishers in each region, I imagine that those changes that it was going throughout its lifetime were kind of getting pushed up against the boundaries of what it feasibly could be because of all of these variables. And that, I imagine that wouldn't be extremely comfortable for the team making this. And I should say too, there's not like finding dev history on this isn't the easiest thing. Like you can find a lot of contemporary reviews of this, but to my knowledge, and I guess, I should be asking you, Mike, there's not like developer interviews where they go into like, here's what it was like making Quest 64. I don't know that those exist.
No, there isn't a lot of it. There is some that's out there, mostly in Japanese publications. And my friend Scott and I, who are big into magazines and promotional stuff, have found like some videos that are now on the internet. But mostly it's just promotional stuff. It's showing L-Tail in the Japanese regions, and you get to see the older UIs. You get to see the playable characters that were not Brian, that were part of the party, but not a lot of, hey, this was us working on it. That's why it was so exciting to talk to James while he was writing the guide, because that was my first real insight into how hectic and how many changes the game went through during the late stages of its development. Imagineer being a Japanese company, it's hard when they don't want to talk about a game that they're not particularly proud of, because, if they were, they would have stopped me from posting about it by now, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, they would have been in your DMs pretty quickly with some legalese. Yeah, that's difficult. You run into that with any Japanese company. Like, they just don't talk to the American press like American companies do. That's to be expected. But especially, companies and teams that were working back in the 90s when the internet wasn't ubiquitous like it is now. An interview with Square today, that's, nobody bats an eye at that. But this was before the internet took over our lives, a much more peaceful time. And, Imagineer, for as well as they've done, and that they're not a no name. It's not like they're Nintendo, It's a little tricky. Speaking of the Japanese version, though, and changes, the Japanese version released about a year after the North American version, and my understanding, I feel so foolish writing this because I know the answer is yes. I wrote, the Japanese version was changed before it released. It's a different product. Does Mike know about this? And who am I talking to? I'm talking to Quest 64 official. Of course Mike knows about this. I'm a rube. What do you know about the differences in the Japanese versus the American versions, Mike?
Yeah, there's some stuff. You're right. We know about it. We, the Quest 64 official, which can't just be me. It has to be a big group of people.
Oh, okay. It's a collective.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Yes. We. Yeah.
You speak for the trees.
I do. Yeah. There's aesthetic changes. There is lots of changes. So aesthetically, the octagon, the battle octagon that you operate in, is a circle instead. I always thought that was for because it works in a 3-dimensional space to stop clipping. Apparently, it was purely aesthetic. I can't find anything that says it was anything other than that. Also, the road signs that you encounter are legible, which would have been great and helpful when traversing.
Oh, man. Yeah.
When you level up, there was an aura about you, is the best way to put it. So if you leveled up like HP, you would get, while you're in battle, you get like a red glow showing that you leveled up. So it was like a visual indicator that Brian had leveled up. So that was cool. There's a longer ending cutscene that I guess a slideshow is a better way to put it, but it was much longer than the ending of the North American version of Quest 64. Showed a lot of the characters that had their time in the game cut down during development and what was happening after you defeat Mammon and finish the game. So that was really cool. There's a translated version of that floating around. Another really big quality of life thing was you were able to put a marker on the map, like, Oblivion or one of those games where it would then guide you towards where you were going next.
Oh my gosh, how I wish we could have had that.
Yeah. So it would at least show you on the map what direction you were going when you opened up the map, which I'm sure a lot of people would have appreciated. And then just other in-game things, the monsters dropped more items. And then there was also critical hits, which were not in the North American version. So both you and the enemies could hit criticals like a traditional RPG. And when Brian was hitting with the club, like a physical attack, you could, if you timed it correctly, you could get a double hit, kind of like, Paper Mario, I guess is the best way to describe that, like a timed attack with your physical attack. So yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of different things. Obviously, all things Imagineer wanted to put in the game, but to meet up with THQ and when they wanted the game out in North America, it didn't happen. So they had the extra year to finish it before it came home to Japan.
Oh, so it was a THQ publisher decision?
That's the idea, is that so Konami had the rights in PAL regions and THQ in America. So it was up to them to name the game and market it. That's why all the 3D renders in North America are the way they are. And it was a much more stylized anime looking marketing campaign in Europe and Japan. But America loved their late 90s 3D renders. I don't know what other games you would think about. I guess Mario, and then things like Rampage, World Tour, just the chunky polygon, smooth marketing. And that's what they did with Quest 64 as well. So yeah, it was up to THQ how they wanted to handle it, and that's how we got Quest.
I do prefer the anime art style, of course, but I think for games of this era, especially games like this, that sort of Americanized polygon, Super Mario 64, Rampage, Clay Fighter 63 and a third, I like what that lends to it. It feels very of the time, and I'm speaking as an American that lived through that time. This is, everybody speaks and experiences through their own ideology, right? And that's what's happening here. That's why I associate it like that. But I do think there's something to it. I think, especially with what the game is, that chunky polygonal art style that's a little more high res. I don't know. There's something special about it. I'm a fan. I like it a lot. But you had mentioned a lot of the overhauls to the mechanics that the Japanese version got. And I think that's a nice segue into talking about how this game plays. One of the first things I was surprised at was, I was surprised at a few different things in terms of how the game plays as a JRPG. There are some things that it does that are a little different. There are some things that are novel, some things that are just straight up missing. But you had mentioned the battle system, so let's talk about that for a moment. This is turn-based, technically, but when it's Brian's turn, Brian is the playable character, the player character. When it's your turn, you've got free reign. You can just move around within this octagonal gate. Circular gate in the Japanese version. I'm going to be honest, I thought it was octagonal just because of the gates of the N64 controller, you know?
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Shapes, man.
Yeah.
And you get to run around like that, and depending on how far away you are from the enemies, you can either use your turn to cast magic, physically strike your enemies, or you can just end your turn, which frustratingly happens a lot. One of the major frustrations I had with this is whenever I was positioning myself in this game, in the overworld map or in battle, Brian has a dash ending animation. You know, whenever he's like stopping from his run, he doesn't stop on the spot like Super Mario Land 1. He doesn't just freeze. He kind of does a little halt. And that little dash ending animation put me out of position so many times to where instead of pressing A to whack the enemy with my staff, I would end my turn and do nothing. And man, did that frustrate me a lot. But that's your options in battle. You can, and you can use an item too, of course. You can use items, you can use magic, you can bonk them, or you can, do nothing. Just try to run away, run outside of the bounds to escape. And I've got to be honest, that combined with the turn-based nature, I thought it was quite nice. There's a lot of potential in this little battle form.
Yeah, and for people who haven't played this game, maybe they've played Parasite Eve. A lot of the same battle mechanics with positioning within a confined area before you choose your attack. They came out pretty close to each other. Parasite Eve was a little bit ahead, but then after that, this style kind of died off. There are games that still kind of do it, but with how novel it was and how much people liked Parasite Eve, you would think that you would have seen more like copycats, or at least people that borrowed the idea and worked towards something different. I always say Grandia 2, which I don't know if listeners have played that or if you've played that, Rick, but that's one of my favorite Dreamcast RPGs, and that kind of has the same thing, but it's a lot more dynamic than this is. There's combining attacks and stuff like that.
Now, the Grandia series is a blind spot in my JRPG life. Currently, I'm filling my blind spot of Lunar, but the thing is that I started it before the remasters came out, but now everybody thinks that I'm just jumping on the bandwagon. They think I'm a poser, and it pisses me off. But no, I'm going to get around to Grandia sometime soon. What would you call that? That real time aspect to battles like that. It seems to have gone by the wayside now with more action oriented turn based games. Like Clair Obscur is an example, but there are so many that I can't even think of one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, yeah, like I'm a little bit shocked that we didn't see more of this too. Especially the progression from something like a Chrono Trigger where spacing in battle mattered, but you didn't have control over it, to this where spacing mattered and you did have control over it. I am a little surprised that we didn't see more. Maybe spacing mattered and you have control of it and the enemies can move too.
Yeah, it's very cool that people are jumping all over Clair Obscur now because a lot of that is praising turn-based, which never really has gone away, or at least I don't think turn-based has ever gone away. But it's nice to see games that take turn-based and do active battle things to them. So in Clair Obscur, there's parries and jumps, and that's part of the defense. And much the same for Quest 64, that's the big draw, is while the enemy is attacking, whether it be a physical attack or a magical attack, as soon as they launch their attack, you, as Brian, in your octagon or circle, can run and evade and dodge the sprites of the magic or the enemy on the screen. So there's a element of skill to evasion, which was cool. And I wish more games did it. Awesome that there's still games today doing things like that to keep you involved instead of just hitting A in extra time.
course, you can play it that way. You can play it just get into position and press A. There are some fights and areas in the game where it behooves you not to do that. But it's not forcing you to engage with this stuff. It's there. I mean, to be clear, it is the system. Like, if you choose not to engage with it, you are choosing to play the game differently than it wants you to, but you can beat it if you just play this like chess, where you move into position, launch an attack, you wait for them to do the same, and then rinse and repeat. You can. Speaking of attacking, there are 4 elements. That 5th one, crystal/ether, was cut. The 4 elements are what you would expect, what Avatar taught us: fire, earth, wind, and water. The wisdom that I've seen is to choose wind on your first playthrough. That seems to be the strongest element. At least that's how it came across to me. Water is the one that heals you, gives you the healing magic, and I cannot imagine doing this game without healing magic. Surprisingly challenging is I think what I'm going to say here. The leveling system is peculiar. Speaking of absences, things that are absent from this game, a traditional EXP counter is gone. That's all done behind the scenes. You will level up after you beat enough enemies. When you level up, you get a spirit point. You can also find these on the world map, but spirit points will let you put points into your magic elements, whichever one you want. Your skills level up in a different way. They level up closer to something like the Elder Scrolls or Final Fantasy II. I didn't write this in the notes, but to level up your defense, for example, you have to take hits. To level up your, I forget if it's agility or evasion, you have to evade enemy attacks. They don't just level up whenever you get a new spirit point. I think the combination of the two is very interesting. I don't remember, though, when the game tells you that. Maybe the instruction manual does, but I don't think the game itself ever tells you.
It actually does, Rick. It's in the menu. It's in the start menu.
Oh.
So if you pause the game, you get, your map and that stuff. But if you flick over a couple screens through the interface, there's a circle, kind of looks like an orb, and that fills up with your experience. That's your combat experience that you get for defeating enemies. That leads to your overall level. But there is also sliders that will show you your agility and your HP and your defense and your MP and how close you are to leveling those up to the next one as well.
Right, but does the game tell you that leveling up your defense, for example, is done by taking hits? Is what I'm curious about.
No, the game in-game it does not, but since you have a SIB copy of the game, things like that and that you need to level the water magic to get the healing spell are in the manual, which when people complain about the game and not knowing that they need to level up water, it's a symptom of the times. We were game renters and now we're game emulators, or however you want to phrase that.
We've circled back to renting, where we buy digital licenses, and who knows when that rental period is up.
Yeah,
right?
So you miss out on a lot of the information that would have come with anybody who rode home from Blockbuster Video reading the manual in the backseat of your parents' Chevrolet on the way to your Nintendo 64, where you have digested all this information. So yeah, in game, no. In the manual, sure, yes.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a fair criticism. That's just something that you did at the time. It was part of the price of the game. And it was part of the experience of playing it too. I have a lot of fond memories reading those instruction manuals. I really miss it. There's something really soulless about opening up a brand new game and seeing nothing on the insert, or, the worst of all, seeing a download code. Oh, how I hate that. How I hate that. I miss having a little chunky booklet. Especially if that booklet had blank pages for notes, which I knew I would never use, but I just liked having them there.
Well, it's because the manual felt valuable, though. Even as a child, I didn't want to write. That's my manual. That's my book. Even when I had games like Fallout 2 on the PC and they gave you, a literal notebook area. What if I never got another copy of that manual to read in study hall? I don't want to put my sloppy handwriting all over it.
It's a travesty. We must move back toward the light. I don't think it'll happen, though. We're not going to get manuals anytime soon again. Speaking of JRPG things, shops and money are notably absent from this game. You can't go to a shop and buy a potion. You don't win a fight and get money. Gil, money with an MUNNY like Kingdom Hearts. You don't get any of that. This society that Brian lives in, some might say it's a little better than what we have today. It's free of capital, where if you are in need of mint leaves, for example, that heal your MP, or honey loaf, loaf bread, honey bread, bread that heals your HP, you simply talk to an innkeeper and they'll give you some. Not like to excess. If you've already got one, they won't give you one. They give it as you need it. A beautiful society. Think about it. Quest 64, ahead of its time.
Don't we all want to move to Kelton, where there's plenty of empty houses and free bread and no money? I certainly do.
Do I have to ride on the pirate ship with the pirates? Important question.
No, there'll be other ways to get there.
Okay, then yes. Yes, I'll go.
Hopefully.
Those pirates, you can't trust them.
They're pretty friendly in this game, though, so you know.
As far as visuals go, I don't really have a lot to say about it. They look very good. For the N64, like, these look terrific. The drawbacks and the downsides are with visual design, level design, things of that nature. But the visuals themselves, this looks very good. It's very vibrant. It's got a terrific color palette. It looks as good as anything else on the N64 at the time. No complaints. I mean, it's a beautiful looking game. I played this on an emulator. I was gonna play it on my CRT. I don't know. I just didn't feel it. So I played it on an emulator, threw up some shaders. It looks beautiful.
I agree, and that was what the original draw was. The RPG I was playing before this was Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy II over here, I guess. So it was crazy for me to go from seeing Cecil walking around the countryside being the same size as his airship, or, you know, the towns and places he was going, and then having Brian, who had trees that were taller than him, and, you know, hills and mountains and buildings to enter. And as long as you think of Quest 64 like a classic RPG and not like Ocarina with RPG elements, the game makes a lot more sense, I guess, to me, with that extra abstraction that you had to do it yourself in the Super Nintendo and Genesis era. But when we got the N64, they did it for you by having stuff, big stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy. It feels both bigger than and smaller than a game like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy IV. It feels bigger than it because of exactly what you said, that scale, right? Castles are bigger than Brian. Trees tower over him. Even the monsters that you're running into are way bigger than him a lot of the time. You see these spawning brooks and rivers. But at the same time, you don't get to see that aerial view of the whole continent. And to be honest, the game Quest 64 does feel quite empty. And I think that has to do with the bit of rushing to get it onto the scene. They didn't have the time to fill it out maybe as well as they would have liked. So in that way, it feels a little smaller. It's a very perplexing experience where it feels both vast but also empty. It feels small, but also more lived in than the world map of an SNES JRPG. It's of the time, I think we could say.
Yeah, that's the abstraction part that I was talking about. Like, if you're playing the Super Nintendo RPG, like Final Fantasy, like we talked about, it's, 20 steps to the next city. Well, when you blow that up into a Nintendo 64 3D environment, those 20 steps become, 300 steps. And having nothing but enemies between you and the next city in a Super Nintendo game isn't a big deal. That's what you're accustomed to. But when a company like Imagineer is trying to develop the first RPG for the Nintendo 64, we don't have ideas for what comes between cities other than enemies. And that's what Quest 64 gives you, is a lot of enemies between cities without extra stuff. So it was more, I guess, the system trying to figure itself out in the 3D space when the only reference points were non-3D RPGs. We had games like Final Fantasy VII, but it's the same thing. When you're in the overworld map, you're just cruising around. The only time you're actually seeing things is when you're in the, cities.
Yeah, yep. As you alluded to, just a different design philosophy. I'm glad that you mentioned the monsters between the towns. This is something that I forgot to bring up in gameplay. This game does have random battles. It doesn't have a battle transition screen like you would see in Final Fantasy VII, for example. you just immediately get thrown into a battle. The battle music starts immediately. You're still on the overworld, kind of. I mean, it's not like Chrono Trigger exactly, but it's close.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. It's like, once again, it's as close as they can get. Like, you can't, if you were running right next to a tree, you're not going to start the battle like in a tree. You're just going to be in an environment that looks very similar to where you were standing, or a spot close to there.
Do you feel like the battle frequency is excessive? I don't know that excessive is what is the word that I would use, but there are a lot of random battles, huh?
No, you're right. It's high. It's a high frequency of random battles. But once again, like something like Dragon Quest or one of the older games, you're met with opposition all the time. I think it's just more jarring in a 3D environment because, like you said, you have to stop, make sure you're facing the right way, figure out what you're fighting against, and then start the battle instead of just pop and then a transition screen. So, but still, the number is high. It's especially if you don't stay on the roads. If you happen to run around the grass and stuff, the encounter rate is even higher there.
Oh, does it drop if you're on a path?
Yeah, but still not significant. Like, it's not going to be 0 for running around just staying on the roads. You're still going to encounter things. It's just less. There's hot spots the further you get from the roads.
I did notice the hot spots insofar as whenever you get close to a house, a hut, a castle, a town, that encounter rate drastically goes down. Drastically go down, as Scott Steiner would say.
The numbers don't lie!
It is quite high, but the game is difficult. So it's kind of to your benefit, at least in, I would say, the first 2/3 of the game, to be engaging with these battles and taking them. There were times when I would stop to grind. You know, I would throw on a podcast and I would get into a battle. I would take down all the enemies but one, and then I would purposely let the last enemy get me down to very little health so I could train my defense stat. Then I would, you know, take care of the enemy, heal myself up, and then rinse and repeat. You know, you throw a podcast on or listen to the battle music if you'd like. That's a pretty efficient way to level up, especially early in the game. I think that's important. This game is difficult. You know, I can't imagine doing this without the water magic with the healing spells. I would be burning through these healing items like crazy. It is not an easy breezy game. You will die, but fortunately, game overs don't really exist. If your HP gets depleted to 0, if they change that stat of yours down to 0, if they nerf your HP down, you just get transported back to the last inn you were at. And you don't lose experience. You don't lose any of your stats, any of your items. You just kind of get reset, which is a nice concession. I don't really feel positively or negatively about it, if I'm being honest. And also, you know, to be truthful, I was using save states, so I didn't die, you know. But it's kind of nice, especially with how frequently the battles happen and how tough some of these enemies can be.
Yeah, no, I've always appreciated it, especially as a younger RPG player. It was nice to know that when the line goes down, like is happening in America right now, that I wasn't going to be too punished by line go down. At least I could pick myself back up by my bootstraps and get back out there. Yeah,
and I think that's the core message of this game, is it's introducing younger players to really pull up their bootstraps, you know? And it's not that kind of game either. It's not trying to be an extremely challenging JRPG for somebody that thought Final Fantasy 1 and 2 and 3 were just too easy. It's not trying to be that. You know, it's like we said, this game is best played by a child on summer vacation. You know, it's introducing you to all of these concepts, and then if you like it, then sure, move into one of a few directions, to another 3D RPG like Zelda, or another quote-unquote harder JRPG like Final Fantasy 6. Well, not 6, I guess that would have come out, like Final Fantasy 7 or something. And if you view it through that lens, that is to say appropriately, I think it succeeds.
I agree. A lot of people like to call it baby's first RPG on the system, but it's not easy. And it can be a gateway to RPGs. It does put everything in front of you and allow you to succeed, but it's not it's not a simple game, I guess is the best way to put it. It's just an easier game.
One thing about the game that surprised me a lot was the music. I had not heard of this soundtrack before. I had never listened to it. I had never listened to Amano's music prior to this. This OST is really quite nice, and I'll go one step further. This is a really good OST.
I agree, especially on a system that gets lambasted for its sound and music. I love Quest 64 music.
It's really emblematic of the N64's aesthetic. There's something about it that just feels so perfectly 64-bit and so perfectly 90s through a CRT sound panel. It really fits that quite nicely. And Masamichi Amano is an accomplished composer. He's got a lot of symphonic works, wind band works. He's got several concerti. He's got apparently an alto saxophone concerto that I could not find. I did find his Concerto Grosso for saxophone quartet. It's like one of those jazzical pieces that's like, Concerto Grosso for saxophone quartet and big band. And it's just like, I've never been fond of that niche genre of jazzical. I don't like it. But anyway, back to Quest 64. It's more mature than you would think, just by going off of Quest's reputation. It's good.
Yeah, and Amano, so I am less familiar with concertos and your expertise in music, but I am familiar with other media that he's done. So he was in, he did Evangelion, the 3.1 or 3.0 plus 1 movie. He also did like 20 episodes.
Oh, no kidding. That was him.
Yep. And like 20 episodes of Berserk. He also did work in the soundtrack of Onimusha 3, I believe that was PlayStation 2, maybe. He also did the soundtrack for the anime adaptation of Oratsu Kadagi, which is from 1987. It was a manga and then a TV show, which is credited with popularizing tentacle porn on television. He was the innovator of music for that genre.
I'm just thankful that we're here to teach children all about the video game medium and occasionally pornography.
Yeah, I just wanted to be the first person to say that on your show, and now that I've done that, I can die a happy man.
I'm going to get a cease and desist from somebody. I just don't know how.
If I haven't, you won't, I promise.
Amano is a really accomplished composer. I was listening to his Euphonium Concerto before we got on the call. It's really nice. He's got some other stuff that I'm not as hot on, but he's very clearly accomplished at what he does, and his works for non-video games significantly outweigh his works for video games. He's done a couple of other major things, but Quest 64 is the only one I'm super familiar with. I know I said this and I'm repeating myself. There's a maturity to the soundtrack, insofar as it's not like a kind of bubblegum feeling collection of melodies and feel-good music that you might expect from quote-unquote baby's first JRPG. And it tries to tie into the theme of Irish heritage. Like this game is based in Celtland. Brian is an Irish name. Irish nationality is a part of this aesthetic. And Amano really honed into that when he was creating this soundtrack. There are a lot of reels, there are a couple of jigs, there are simulated bagpipes, those drones that you'd hear. And the maturity comes in with like, there are some harmonies and voice leadings that you just wouldn't expect to come out of a video game OST. I'll talk about them. I think I noted them whenever we get into the story, so I'll talk about them maybe a little bit later. But I was really shocked. This OST is really, really good. Do you have a favorite track from this game?
I'm a big fan of the Holy Plains, but that's just based on repetition. It's been burned into my skull for the last 25 years. Boil Hole is pretty good too. Some of the Dondrin stuff.
We played the American version, Holy Plans.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah, we do have a holy plan here in America. You're right.
Big typo on the world map, Holy Plans. I think it's hysterical. And I kind of think the Holy Plains music is hysterical too. It's so funny. You know, it's extremely, that's about as lighthearted as this game gets. It's funny. Like, I laughed every time I heard it.
Yeah, it's got a goober vibe to it, definitely, that goes along with the, like, monster aesthetics and stuff like that. It's one of those things where limitation breeded something cool and quirky, I guess. I don't want to compare this to a game that, like, literally everybody loves, but this is the same feeling that I get when I listen to the music of Undertale. You knew that Toby Fox, like, could have put any music in that game, but instead he purposely limited it to a specific, like, a type of music that a vibe. It was just a vibe, you know. And so I will always love this music. I play it in the background. It's Amano's opus for me.
The similarities between Undertale and Quest 64 that jump out immediately to me are the choice of sound font, you know, just confining oneself to a quote-unquote primitive sound font, which, you know, I know it wasn't primitive at the time for Quest 64.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. And an adherence to and focus on melody. That's kind of, you know, Quest 64, it's, you know, there are melodies abound. The coolest parts of the soundtrack, though, to me, are listening to the accompaniments, which are super cool. The shop theme, the shop/inn theme, is my favorite in the game. And it's not like this bombastic track, it's just very low-key. It's just one melodic flute over top of like a pulsing string section, but you hear that voice leading that's in the accompaniment, that nice chromatic voice leading that just embellishes the whole thing up a notch or two. Whereas they could have just made like a little dee-da-doo-da-doo-da-dee, like a little chirpy whatever kind of throwaway melody for the shop, you know. It's really, really nice. There's also modality, weirdly enough. Like, modality in music is when you, just a super basic explanation, you take a major scale and you play it top to bottom, but instead you start on a different note. So instead of C to C, all white keys, you play D to D, all white keys, for example. And there's some of that in here where you would expect it to stay within the key center, but he chooses to go modal with it. That gives it this extremely folk music kind of vibe that is, like, I was grinning ear to ear whenever I heard it. I think that one's in Larapon or Larpoon. I don't remember the town name.
Yeah, Larapool, but...
Larapool.
Yeah.
Larapool.
Great music there, too. It's incredibly intimidating talking music with you, especially when we're talking about a soundtrack that's so, like, limited and lighthearted, like we've been talking about. So you drew all sorts of stuff out of this that I have not thought about in decades.
Yeah, I'm just some nobody from southwestern Pennsylvania. I don't know anything. But speaking of not knowing anything, that's a total non sequitur. I wasn't even going to follow up on that. Why don't we go ahead and get into the story? If you're familiar with the show, you know this is about the time where we take a little brief music break, which we're going to do in a moment, before we do a beat-by-beat narrative analysis. We are going to do that here. However, this will be closer in form, I think, to the Final Fantasy I episode, because this story is extremely reduced and pared down, whittled down in the N64 version that was shipped. It is kind of a faint whisper of what it once was, I think, in the devs' minds. But we'll still talk about it. I've got notes from tip to toe, the beginning to end, and we're going to go through all of it and talk about the gameplay experience and what we liked, what we didn't like. And I think now I'm going to stop talking so I can give Mike a chance to talk. You ready to talk story?
Always. Expansive this story is, and I'm ready to hit every single beat of it.
Perfect. Let's take a step out of the monastery and into the Celtland Holy Plans and talk all about Quest 64. So you boot up this game, you are immediately thrown into a conversation with the Grand Abbot. He's a man in white with a big long nose and huge bushy eyebrows that conceal his eyes. These are the kind of eyebrows I wish I had. And this is where you get story. This conversation, this is your reason for questing. It's also one of the only narrative deliveries in the game. And here's what Grand Abbot says to you. Brian, even though I've begged you not to leave, you still say you must go after your father. No matter how wonderful your powers may be, you are still a child. Your father, Lord Bartholomew, left to search for the stolen L-Tale book and has been missing for a month. No wonder you are worried about him. Contained in the words of the book is a power that exceeds human knowledge. I wonder who could have possibly stolen it from the crypt of the monastery. If an evil person should use it, the country and all its cities will be destroyed, the spirit's blessings will disappear, and Celtland will once again be visited by a, quote, day of grief. Bartholomew's disappearance may mean he is caught in fighting over the book. If you go, you may find yourself in danger as well. If you still insist, you can begin by going to Dondoran. I'll ask the king of Dondoran Castle to protect you. And that's kind of 75% of this game's story.
That's a pretty accurate number. There's a lot of NPCs we'll meet along the way that give you flavor text and sort of point you into the next town or where you're supposed to be going. But yeah, you're looking for the book. You're looking for your dad. You don't know why, but you're doing it because that's what kids do.
They give you flavor text, but it's the kind of world building that doesn't advance the Ultimania plot of the world, but more like what the townsfolk are up to. You know, they're not going to be talking about the history of the Day of Grief or anything like that, but they do give you a sense of what's going on in these towns. You know, why the wind has stopped and we can't work because the wind has stopped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now that the abbot has given us our reason for questing, we can explore the monastery now, Melroad Monastery. Shockingly empty. There's a lot of empty rooms in here.
Shockingly realistic is the way I put it. If you were in a huge building, would you expect every room to have people in it, laying in bed, or groups of people in every single room? No, there'd be people out in the common areas, and then there'd be lots of rooms with nobody in them, because that's not where you hang out during the day, especially when there's evil afoot.
You speak with experience, I take it. You spend a lot of time in monasteries?
Yeah, that's one of my passions, is visiting monasteries during the time period that they were active.
A lot of Irish Catholic monasteries. You know, Mike is a very Irish name.
Is it? See, I didn't know that either. Perfect.
Oh, hell if I know, man.
I was built for this game, apparently.
I'm not Irish at all. The music is extremely pleasant here. I put it in the notes, but we just kind of talked about it. And I put in the notes that the world map music cracks me up. Did I write this or did you write this? It's Goober music. Was that you?
No, you wrote it, but I had to make sure to say it while we were talking about music because it just killed me. I did a whole section of Goobers on the internet with Nintendo 64 characters, and I love that you included. That's one of my favorite words to describe things in video games. Little dudes and goobers.
You say realistic, I say empty. The reality of it is that many of these rooms are uninhabited. They look very similar, and there are a lot of them. There really are. There's a horse outside that you can talk to. Like any red-blooded American man, I'm going to talk to a horse. I think this was supposed to be this game's version of Epona. That is to say the horse, not the sorceress. Surely I'm not wrong about that, right, Mike?
No, you're right. There was talk of riding horses in earlier versions to traverse, but we didn't get there. We didn't quite get the Ocarina Epona, but, we did get Epona before Ocarina, so another check in the Quest 64 box, right?
So our destination is Dondoran Castle. Dondoran, Dondoran Castle, like the Grand Abbot said, to talk to the king. It looks like I may have made a mistake. We cross the Holy Pains, as I've written here. Is it Holy Pains or Holy Plans in the American version?
Well, the map says plan, but it's plain, obviously. But yeah, sometimes you can't be bothered to fix things when you got to beat Ocarina to the shelves.
Well, hey, some of this battle frequency, that's a holy pain. Oh, bro. Thank you. Is it hot in here? Or is it just me? So as we said, there's no currency. If you need a healing item like bread or like mint leaves, you can go to these inns. You can also get wings at these inns too, buffalo flavored, and each one will take you back to the town from which you from which you've received them. So if you get the red wings, the team from, I don't know, Dondoran, if you use those at any time when you're not in a forest, you'll get transported back there immediately. Once you use them, they're gone, but you can always get another because this game is a society without capital. It's a dream. So you can always get one once you've run out. You can't have more than one, but once you need it, you can go and get it. This saved my butt a lot of times. You know, I don't like to rely on save states. I like to save in the game too. So I use these wings a lot. I kind of think this is a really nice system.
Yeah, it didn't have the fast traveling, which I don't know how frequent that was in N64 games. I don't know that it happened a lot. Well, no, even things like Final Fantasy VII that came out before, you had to physically travel. There wasn't fast traveling.
And let's put ourselves in the fiction. Brian is only master apprentice. He's not an apprentice master yet. He hasn't achieved that rank yet. You really think he's going to be fast traveling with magic?
Yeah, weird.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a comedy podcast. We get to meet Shannon, a woman named Shannon at the inn for the first time here. Do you want to introduce Shannon?
Sure. You don't know a lot about her at the beginning of the game. You're drawn to Shannon. Shannon Stork is a very polarizing figure, and obviously you're going to find her, and foreshadowing, you're going to find her a lot. But yeah, you talk to her. She gives you some destination as to where you're going next and what you're doing, but it's not direct. She just alludes to watching you and your journey a lot.
See, you say that obviously you're going to find her. I have heard from many folks anecdotally that they went through the whole game without talking to her once, or maybe talking to her like at this first inn and then never again.
Did they not save the game very often? She's in a lot of towns.
Well,
I like to explore, I guess.
No, dude, I'm with you. Like I exhaust every NPC conversation I can because that's what I like. I love world building in games. That's why I like the Xeno series so much. That series is full of it. But I mean, like, you're not required to talk to Shannon to advance the plot until you are at the end game. So you could go through, theoretically you can, and anecdotally, I was just listening to a podcast today where one of the hosts said, yeah, I didn't talk to her at all. And it's like, if you do that, you are missing out on the little story this game has to offer, because Shannon will drip feed that to you. She drip feeds you hints on where to go and also on what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I would more attribute that to people who had mentally checked out. I'm not like so detached from reality that I think that people play this game and don't love it as much as I do. And when they get, a third or halfway through, they're like, all right, I'm just beelining it to the end of the game now. So then you skip NPC interactions. You're just trying to get to the next MacGuffin, like you said, the next thing. So yeah, missing her. Yeah, there's no gates for talking to her until there's a gate for talking to her.
I do wish they would have just required that, even if it's as simple as you enter a new town. And I mean, this game doesn't really have cutscenes, not really. But even if it were as simple as you enter and you're forced into a conversation, I would have appreciated that more. I don't like the idea that folks just play this without knowing the story. That bothers me. I don't like that. But you talk to her here, she'll tell you that there's a robber blocking the road to Loch Kildery, which is, I love that name so much. And everybody's stuck there. They can't work until that path is cleared. You can talk to folks and they'll lament not being able to work. Everybody wants to work all the time, but they can't. The king here, Scottfurt, another A+ name. He's aware that you're searching for your pops, is what I wrote. I don't know why I behave this way sometimes, but he insists that you help him take down the thief. It's like, hey, this thief stole the Earth Orb from my personal treasury. I want you to help me, and then I'll help you.
Yeah, so you're off and into the fray. It's great to be in the first town because, like you said, if you die, you return with very little pomp and circumstance other than waking up and shaking out your ahoge hair. So yeah, it's a good beginning spot. You'll end up back here a lot because I guarantee you're gonna, if you're not using save states, you're going to die a lot on your way to the thief in the forest.
I didn't think I'd meet anybody else that would know what ahoge hair is, but here we are. And Brian does have it. Straight up. Literally straight up.
Yeah.
That's ahoge hair. This thief's name is Solvering. He's deep within this forest, Connor Fortress. He looks super rough and tough. He's wearing like an entire panther skin as like a decoration on his body. And this is where the name of the game for like every fight for me comes into play. Wind Cutter, which I wrote Winter Cutter. I need to proofread. Wind Cutter and Large Cutter. Those are two wind-based skills that I pretty much used exclusively throughout the whole game. And that's on me. Like, I'm not knocking the battle system saying that it's boring or anything. I'm saying that I chose to do wind only and water occasionally, but I didn't really experiment with fire or earth. Earth gives you a lot of defensive magic. Fire, I've seen everywhere folks say that it's kind of the worst one, the most risky one, we can maybe say. But I largely just stuck to wind on my playthrough.
It's mostly important that you just focus on one element offensively. Like water, you get to your healing. You can go all the way with water, but the range on water spells is limited. Wind is fun. I like wind. Like you said, fire is risky. A lot of the later baddies that we're going to run into have some fire resistance, so that's why a lot of people say that it can't carry you to the end of the game. And earth is awesome. Besides having the defensive spells, it also has some rock throwing abilities, which I like to meme about, and it has the most powerful offensive spell much later on in the game.
Oh, speaking of spells, here's something that I wanted to ask you. Is this a Rick problem? Like, did I not level enough, or is this a universal experience? I felt like I missed my attacks like 40% of the time. My attacks were missing. Is that just how this game goes?
It is, because you're, like you said, you're an apprentice magician, Rick. You're not a magician.
Of course. Yes, I'm a master apprentice, not an apprentice master. Of course. I haven't earned that assistant to the regional manager title yet.
Not yet. So yeah,
Damn
Brian
it.
misses a lot of attacks. He's just learning. He's just a little guy doing some stuff.
Yeah, it was annoying for a while. With magic like Wind Cutter, for example, where it's a multi-hit attack, it's kind of less committal because you've got multiple chances to hit. Whereas some of the stronger magic that you have to get up close and personal to use, it's one big hit, and if you miss, well, that's a turn that you wasted, and you've wasted some MP, which isn't great. I've also got a note here that this is where the camera became my sworn enemy in this game.
Understood.
The navigation in this game, you have a map, the Holy Plans map, and it'll tell you where you're going. Like, it's not a mini map like, in whatever modern game. It's just you have to press the button to pull up the map. You see where you are. Okay, great. But once you enter a town, a forest, or a dungeon or a cave, you no longer have access to it. It'll just show you as being in that cave on the world map. So you have to rely just on your compass. And because the visual design of these dungeons are so wallpapered similarly, they all have a very similar look. Everything starts to feel samey. You can get turned around extremely easily. And in forest areas like this and one of the upcoming ones, that pissed me off to no end. Now, thankfully, if you beat a battle, like if you win, the game will automatically put you facing back the direction you were going, no matter what. If you run away from a battle, it does not do that. It'll just keep you whichever direction you're facing as you try to run away. That's a little tip. If you're in an area in a dungeon that's tricky to navigate, do your best not to run away. Otherwise, you might get turned around, and there's no map, and the battle frequency is high, and you'll get frustrated and angry, and you'll say, "Why am I doing this? Claire Obscure just came out. What's my problem?"
Valid. It's all valid. No, you're not wrong, dude.
I'm teasing, but I'm not. The navigation system in this game pisses me off a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had the little tidbits of post-battle clarity and the direction that you're going. Another popular thing to do is the hand on the wall method. So if you're in the forest, pick a wall, put your hand on it, and then make sure Brian keeps the hand on the wall, because then you know you're going that direction. So, put your left hand on the left wall of the forest, and then you'll always be traveling the same direction with your left hand on the wall.
Oh, nice. I tried that once at a haunted house when I was a kid, and I got spooked by someone. I don't trust it anymore.
Those jump scares happen in this game, too. You might run up against the big plant that looks like it's from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or whatever. So.
Or a wyvern.
Yeah.
Yeah, those beasties are tough. You take down the thief, You're an apprentice magician. You're no slouch. And the king lets you keep the earth orb for your troubles. Everybody throughout this game is going to do the cliche JRPG thing. They're alluding to the fact, cliche fantasy thing, that you're a special boy of destiny. They're kind of alluding to that, that you could make use of this treasure somehow. So you progress through the Dondrin Flats. You eventually come across another hotel, Shannon, an inn. Shannon will be there as always, and she tells you that Larpool is across the lake, and there's a ship conveniently parked outside that looks like a pirate ship. Pirates did play into the original inception of this game. The Captain Morag is wearing a wizard's hat for some reason. I don't think wizards and pirates mix. This is a controversial podcast. We're not afraid to go there, right? Yeah, we're not your dad's podcast. We're not afraid to go there, okay? And hey, let me just say, you can curse on this program. That's fine. And hey, by the way, we're going to get there, okay? Wizards and pirates don't mix. That seems improper and unholy. I don't appreciate it.
I believe you made a note about how this is an extremely powerful combination, though. Or did I make that all up in my head?
Yeah, I'm masking my fear here is what's going on. But this is something that I didn't know would bug me until I heard another podcast talk about it on another game. Like, it wasn't on this game. But the way that you travel in this game is by going into a ship, and you exit the ship and you're suddenly in a different location. You don't get any of that fiction of traveling. You don't get the fiction of going into a bed to sleep. You just get a kind of black screen, and then it comes back. And did you have a nice sleep? Or you go into the ship cabin and then you exit and boom, you're in another location. That really robs you of the fiction, and it's one of those things where now that I noticed it, I can't not notice it in every other game. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's just another what I said earlier, it's one of the areas, the aspects of the game that what could have been, right? Star Wars prequel syndrome.
Nautical travel is just not one of the 64 quests that you embark on, Rick.
Oh, that was DLC. That was the 65th Forbidden Quest.
Yeah.
And hey, we're a controversial podcast. Wait till you see the 69th one. Whoa! Morag implies that your father, my dad. I made that joke like 5 times in here because we're both retrograde amnesia fans. Shout out to our boys over there.
That's why we're doing it bit by bit, beat by beat.
Yeah, bit by bit. I thought about doing like anytime I shout them out, I think about doing a fake net impression, but that feels like I'm stealing. And also now the fake net is dead. R.I.P.
Yep. I was also going to shout them out when you said you were playing Lunar, because we know it's not because of the most recent release. It's because that's just what we do over at Retrograde Amnesia, is play Lunar forever.
Yeah, unironically, it actually was. It was them that kind of gave me the kick in the rear to start it. And I unironically love it. I love Lunar. But anyways, Morag implies that your father, my dad, was his last passenger. And, this is where we go through the sailing. I also wrote a paragraph about pirate wizards having strong moral constitutions, but we're already out of control, so I'm going to ignore my shenanigans. And this is where we get to Larapool. The music here, this is the bagpipe music that I was talking about, the bagpipe drones with a melody over it, kind of like a reel, kind of. It's not a jig, it's kind of like a reel, where it gets into some crazy modality where you have sharp 4s that shouldn't be there. The music is so cool. This isn't a town, though, so much as it is like a gazebo / a fountain area with one inn and a singular wing store, like Wingstop. Well, no, not Wingstop. I am fairly certain Keltland does not have Wingstop, but that's kind of all that's here.
Well, the funny thing about carrying the fandom for Quest 64 is we can make anything we want canon because Imagineer just refuses to stop me. So if you want to change it to Wingstop, right here we can change the lore on this podcast.
I appreciate how you put the responsibility on Imagineer to rein you in. It's not their problem. You are their problem. It's not your fault.
Yeah, I'm just not giving any direction. So this is the direction we're taking.
Shannon is here. She'll tell you that the wind and water have both stopped here due to a, quote, evil force. Whether it's here or in Normoon, the Wind City, our fortune awaits. You meet Layla at the inn. Now, is Layla the reworked version of your potential second party member that was going to be in the game? Or is that somebody else?
That is somebody else, but you do not see her frequently in the game is the best way to put it. Her name is Flora. Flora,
that's it. Layla is this town's sorceress. Her character model makes her look like a main character. That's why I asked. She says that the wind has stopped here and that demons are now roaming free around Normoon. She's using all of her power to fight them off. She also lets us know that if any of the 4 elemental forces overpower the rest, we're doomed. You know, this delicate balance. If that gets thrown off, everything goes topsy-turvy.
This is another one of those spots where likely there was a lot more flavor text from Layla and probably was just cut due to constraints of the game, or maybe there was a side quest to add to your 64 quests somewhere in here where you had to retrieve something to bring back to her. But yeah, it just ends up being a weird short conversation and then you're off again.
Well, that's another thing that's absent from this game, side quests. Yeah. If it sounds like we're just kind of going and then you go here and then you go here, that's kind of because that's what you do for a lot of this. Like, we're skipping over the traversal and the fighting, but now you arrive at Normoon after you do traversal and fighting. Shannon is here, of course. She points you toward the Windward Forest, where the Wind Sorcerer was last seen. This is where I made a note about the navigation. This forest dungeon really got the better of me, really got me frustrated.
Understood. I guess you could have used that Japanese world map and the pinpoint marker.
Yeah, or I honestly probably could have just slowed down a little bit and just taken my time a bit more. Once you get through here, though, Zelsa is in these woods. Zelsa was the first boss fight that was a little tough for me. Zelsa uses wind as their element, and since I was playing wind, it had reduced damage. So, and also Zelsa has your Wind Cutter attack as well as a stronger one called Wind Horizon. A bit of a tough fight. I struggled the smallest amount here.
Have you played any of the Monster Rancher series?
No, actually I haven't.
So it's kind of like Pokemon, but it's famously known for you putting your random CDs into your PlayStation and it generates a monster based on the data. Anyway, the spacing, because we're in the 3D environment, and this is the first time where you might learn that because you were obviously fighting from a distance. Some bosses are much easier to beat up close, like in the close third to them, and then they all have like a middle range attack that they would use in the middle third of their range, and then they all have an attack that they use in their outer third. So that was an important part of Monster Rancher, was when you were fighting Pokemon style, there was also like spacing, like a tactics game almost, but this is Quest 64, so it's in real time where you have to move yourself to be that distance away. So yeah, if you're using the same element as a person and in their ideal range for hitting you with their most powerful attacks, this is one of those spots where you could get walled really early in the game.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely tough. Yeah, spacing is an aspect to battle that it behooves you to pay attention to, especially because you can regenerate your MP if you're in a pinch just by either waiting or bonking them with your staff right up close. And speaking of bonking with staffs, if you bonk Zelsa with your staff enough, you win the fight, you get the wind gem back. And of course, you're going to keep this one because you're the special boy. Now, Layla will tell you to go to this sorceress named Epona. There is somebody named Epona in this game. I've got to wonder if that's a coincidence. But to get to her, we have to go through Blue Cave, which is a hell of a dungeon. It is my second least favorite dungeon in the game. It's just a lot of long twisting hallways. And again, like I don't want to continually dock points for the same thing from this game. We're not docking points. It's not how art works, but you know what I mean by that phrase. I don't want to keep harping on this, but this is the first time I noticed like this is a lot of hallways and a lot of just sameness. At least though Blue Cave is pretty. It is a very pleasant, beautiful shade of blue.
I'm just glad you called it Blue Cave and not the Ice Cave. Another great part of Celtland is that there is no snow level. And as a mailman, that is my absolute gaming and real-world nemesis, is snow when I'm traversing.
I just want to go on record and say this podcast does not endorse that view. I like snow levels.
I just don't like traversing them, Rick, because I don't like putting my feet in snow.
Yeah, I know. It's rough and coarse and it gets everywhere.
You almost made it one whole episode without a Star Wars reference. You didn't even do Layla.
I understand why you think that. You tuned me out whenever I mentioned it a few times before, as you should have. I don't recommend anybody listen to me more than a couple of minutes at a time. No good comes of it. You get to Epona. Her house is outside of the cave. She is kind of the old hag archetype, you know, hunched back, huge nose, long blue hair. She tells you a lot of what we already know, that we're a special boy, the Eltail book has been stolen. She also mentions a war from 1,000 years ago over the book's possession. She says this, but no one knew the truth behind the book's power. No one must ever open the book. If its power is released, it will be the Ned of all we know. I'm assuming that means end, and I just miswrote. That is why the Eltail book must be rescued and returned to safekeeping. This is interesting lore. It's not followed up on until like a crucial point in the story, though. That's like the number one thing that I am noticing. That's the number one thing with this game that feels like it could have been, is that the lore is so cool. And that's what makes me excited to play the Game Boy version. You had mentioned that it's much more fleshed out there.
It is, yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. She's got a fancy teleporting pad to get to our next area, Isle of Skye in Loch Kildery. There are a couple of teleporting pads we go to. We just walk into them and they teleport us. It's functionally the same as the pirate ship. We talked to Colleen there. What's her deal? Is she the sorceress of this town? I wrote water spirit, but that's not right.
You're spot on. She is the sorceress. And that's also where you meet Kiliak, who is one of the 3 characters that would have been in your party if not for the cuts in the party system.
Oh, that's the who used to be Cozy?
Yep. It's the same character model, or at least an approximation of the same character model.
Yeah, he's right up with Colleen in her humble abode. She is kind of perturbed that he won't leave her alone, and he's just kind of in there chilling. She seems more preoccupied with getting rid of him, than helping you. Pirates, I mean, and that's, pirates are known to get weak knees over sorceresses. Who can blame them? The water gem's been stolen, of course, so that's our cue. We've got to go get it back. It's been stolen by Nepti, who has been hiding out in the Crystal Valley. Crystal Valley? Is that the right name?
Yeah, spot on again.
Thank you. This is basically like an underwater dungeon of sorts. She's stolen this gem, the water jewel, to try to take over the humans. It's that kind of villain motivation. This fight, I don't really have much to say about most of the fights. This one also became cast Wind Cutter 3 and Large Cutter, heal when necessary, and that's kind of it. Nepti, not super challenging.
No, but this might be the first elongated fight, I guess. If you haven't been leveling up like Rick has, she's pretty bulky. I think she's got 900 or 1,000 HP, which when you're doing, 20s and 30s, if you haven't focused on one single element, or if you were focusing on water because it's got the cool healing spells, this can be a tough one. Or at the very least, it can make you waste an entire afternoon beating her.
That's true. You do, though. You do beat her and you take the water gem. Colleen will give it to you. That's kind of the pattern here. You get the gem back and it's given to you as a gift. She tells us to get the pirate out of her sight. We do not do that. But she does have a teleportation room, so we use it, and we're going back to Epona's house. And if you talk to her, she'll say the following to you. She says, I see you've obtained the water jewel. The truth is, that gem is not all that it seems. Shut inside of it is the power of the L-Tail book. That means if you are not worthy, overwhelming forces will be released. But if you use your strength correctly, you can triumph over all. It is now up to you, Master Brian. You were the spirit's chosen one from the time you picked up the crystal. I would not have wished such a thing upon one so young. Now you can return to town from the stone circle. The town being Larpool. Again, we're getting whiffs of a cool story here, but it doesn't really play out outside of dialogue boxes. Does that make sense?
You're right. Much like you said about another podcast you listen to, if you do not go looking for story and you're just beelining through battle after battle, it ends up being a lot like the in-between parts of Pokemon, where you think that the whole game is about leveling up your Pokemon, but there's really a story behind it, and a lot of kids don't seem to remember that. But yeah, same with Quest. You have to go looking for what little lore is here. Otherwise, you're just fighting dudes, little fucked up dudes between towns.
Right, and with respect to you, Mike, like, I don't want to misrepresent myself here. Even if you do find all the lore from the NPCs, it's not a complete story. With respect to you, like, the narrative of this game was sheared away to next to nothing, and I think that's a detriment to the experience. Again, it could have been something much cooler. But you are right. Like, if you don't talk to anybody, you are going to have a markedly worse time. It is not to your benefit to just beeline this game, you know, just like Pokemon. Which, by the way, the story of Pokemon, the actual story, is collecting all 151 Pokemon. That's what you're supposed to do. Nobody ever does, though. You got to fight.
Yeah.
Cut, strength, fire blast.
Yeah. I think you're doing a good job of representing the story correctly, though. I don't think you're misrepresenting it. And I think that maybe I am overselling it a little bit just because I'm so familiar with it. But because we're hitting all of the big things on it, it seems like there's a much more present story here. But like you said, the average game player, if you're not hunting for every little bit in every town, you're going to get zero story. And there's a pretty big gap between the zero story and what little bits are here.
Speaking of what little bits are here, I don't remember how we arrive here, but we arrive at Limelin. Do you remember who tells us to go here? Is it Epona?
Yeah, it's after that.
Okay. Shannon is here at Limelin's Inn, and she gives you a kind of out of left field ponderance about human nature. She says, "This is a grand city, don't you think? But isn't it strange? People build a metropolis to last 1,000 years, but human lifetime is just a passing thought." And that's it. She doesn't elaborate on that. We don't have time to unpack all of that.
We're just a little guy. And once again, this is another reference to the 1,000 years, which is going to be a recurring theme pretty much through the end of the game.
Is that 1,000 years war / Day of Grief, is that more present in the Game Boy Color version?
Well, if you have me back on for that, maybe we'll talk about it then.
All right, you drive a hard bargain, but deal.
Yeah.
You heard it here, listeners. Set in stone now. It's set in limestone, like in Limelin. There's a jail here in Limelin that is hysterical. It's just a room with an attic, and that's the jail.
Well, when you don't have capitalism fueling the police state and no money coming in from keeping people in jails, this is what jail looks like, Rick.
Now, hold on. You've said a lot of inflammatory things that offend me as a red-blooded American. I think the problem is that they're not keeping the illegals out of Limelin. I think that's the issue here.
It's definitely not that, because everybody wants to work. There's plenty of people who want to work.
Shit. You're crushing all of the arguments that I learned from Facebook. Abort. We got to get out of here. The King's Castle is vast. Next note. Move on. The Limelin Castle. It's more vast than the monastery that you started the game in with King Abbot. Grand Abbot, excuse me. Deanna is here. She's the queen. I wrote the King's Castle. No. It's Deanna the queen. She's here. She was expecting you vis-a-vis a letter from Princess Flora of Dondoran. You said Flora was our would-be party member, right?
Yep, correct.
And we didn't see her when we were in Dondoran, did we?
We don't, but you do see her sometime.
I'm worried that I didn't write that down, but
Nope.
I mean, you know the game well enough.
You're doing just fine. You didn't miss her.
Deanna says that the fire starter Fargo is the baddie that we're after this time, and as you might expect, they've got the fire jewel, so that's our next task. He's hiding in the Baragoon Tunnel. Excellent name. It's just a series of brown hallways. It's not one of the better locations in the game. You don't find him right away, though. You find this red-haired woman named Shilf. And this is where we hear the name Mammon for the first time. Shilf says, "I'm Shilf, servant of Mammon. I've been waiting 1,000 years for him to return. If I'm correct, I sense but 3 precious stones." And this is a fight. This was tough for me. I've read online that this shouldn't be tough, but I don't know. I had a little bit of trouble here. It ate up a lot of my healing items.
Once again, it's much like Pokemon. It depends what element you were leveling up. If you did more water stuff, she's not really great against water. If you did more earth stuff, she's also pretty susceptible to getting rocks thrown on her head. But wind it was for you, Rick.
That's true. All wind attacks all the time. No status debuffs because I am a champion. I'm a man.
Much how many of us played Pokemon back in the day. If it didn't do damage, why did you do it?
Yeah, exactly. Cut, strength, flamethrower, fire blast. Winning strategy. Suck it, Lance. You can't handle me. You beat her. You exit the tunnel. There's an NPC in a tent here that looks like Jesus Christ. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. I just think it's hilarious.
I'm glad you found it, but that's the whole thing.
Why, I knew to look for him because of you made a meme about him. This desert, man, I hated this area. It really frustrated me.
The Dries is big. So we talked about how sparse stuff is, how empty the environments and stuff are. Once you get into the desert, you are met with an entirely different level of sparse, like a real desert, Rick.
Oh, of course, that's right. This game goes for realism. That's my fault. No, there's a mechanic where if you go too far, it teleports you back to the middle, and it's really disorienting is all. That's what bothered me the most about this.
Understood.
There's a marker in the middle. It's not marked on your map, but you have to get to it just, by sight. And it takes you to your next location, Shamwood, where you meet Lavar. He says that he, quote, once held the Eltail book, but when I opened it to unleash its incredible powers, I was not worthy. The only powers I could control were those of famine and destruction. And this dialogue comes out of nowhere. I was like, this is the shit that I wish was in the game. He goes on, he says, I could hate, but I could not love. I could terrify, but not inspire. Finally, the great magician Epona came to my rescue and freed me from the curse of the Eltail book. But my penance is that I have been exiled here, alone for eternity, or until the even that we call Mammon is defeated. This is the cool shit. Like, this is what I wish this game was.
And it's entirely optional. Like you said, this area, the Bass Pro Shop pyramid in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, completely optional. You could just beeline straight from when you come out of Baragoon Tunnel through Greenock and straight to Boilhole, the next area, and miss this entirely. There is very little reason to go out here because there is nothing else other than that, and not really anything to do other than plot. And it's some of the best plot stuff in the game, like you said. So.
It's lore that I wish we heard more about. Even if we just had a few more NPCs talking about it, like Layla, like any of the sorceresses, that would be awesome. But we really don't. It's just a missed opportunity. It could have been. Maybe they'll remake this one day. That'd be pretty sick. The next stop, well, you had mentioned Boilhole. There's a brief stop in a town called Greenock, but there's not a whole lot there. So let's jump to Boilhole. A phenomenal duo of words.
Yes.
I think this is the worst dungeon in the game. I think this is worse than Blue Cave, personally. It's a series, again, of like red-brown hallways with some lava texture, lava wallpaper, but it's so much more vast than Blue Cave. You're not in confined hallways as much. There are more like openings. And I got turned around in here so much. This is where I made a point to note that the lack of a mini-map hurts this game a lot.
Yeah, this is, when I was talking about hand on the wall, this is the dungeon that created that necessity, especially in young me. Hand on the wall, left hand on the wall, because it's actually a really linear, it's a snake. It doesn't have diverging paths or that many of them. There's a middle part that's kind of wider. But if you do hand on the wall all the way through, from west to east, mostly, it's not so bad, but it's still long, and the enemies are tough.
They really are. You run into a different kind of wyvern here, like a brown one. The fire enemies do a lot of damage. I didn't take as many notes on the enemies as I probably should have. But this is one of the few times like playing through this area where I was not thrilled about picking this game up. I don't know. I should have done the hand on the wall method. That would have saved a lot of my strife here. We run into Fargo finally, though. He's here and he says, "Welcome, fool." To which I say, "Fuck yeah, man." He's going to take your jewels or die trying. I actually didn't write anything about this fight. I don't have anything to say about it. I didn't struggle too much. Wind cutter, large cutter, heal when necessary. Maybe that's on me. Maybe I didn't play very excitingly.
No,
what do you think about Fargo?
No, he's just a dude, and it is kind of a. So we did encounter Shilf before this, who was heavy in the marketing material, especially if you've watched the commercials for Quest 64. Much kind of like Resident Evil featured a certain vampire lady in all of their marketing. Shilf was heavy in the Quest 64 late 90s marketing, only to not be the boss. So Fargo kind of seems like a letdown after you fought Shilf and not received another elemental gem / orb. He's just a dude.
Yeah, he does feel kind of redundant in that way. I don't remember how we get here, but my next note says that we get to Brannock. It kind of looks like it was inspired by Final Fantasy VII, like kind of straight up. It's got that dingy sort of sci-fi slum-inspired sort of vibe, kinda, you know? Shannon is here, of course. She follows you everywhere. She suggests that your father might have been put in jail by King Bagus. Bagus, I think is probably how you would say it. Well, no, I don't know. In Japanese, that would probably be Bagus. Could be Bagus, I don't know.
She also alludes to there being a big shadow over the city itself and the castle, which is a really cute way of saying that we're getting close to the end of the game and we've run out of resources and time. So this is going to be dark here and there's not going to be a lot going on.
You run into a goon named Guilty that turns into like a mini boss fight. I don't think Guilty has really much to do with anything. I don't know. Am I wrong about that? I didn't write much about Guilty.
No, other than being once again, a pretty challenging fight depending on how you leveled. Guilty's quite the wall and does a lot of damage if you get up close to him.
Yeah. You want to use that ranged magic like wind. That'll really get you far. You also run into here, in addition to Guilty, you run into Leonardo. He kind of shares your character model a little bit. He's a small wizard. He doesn't have your ahoge hair. I almost said ahiga. That's something completely different. He is a blonde little kid wearing white, blue, and gold. He's here to rescue who else but your pops. I mean, your dad, Lord Bart, Lord Bartholomew. Bartholomew? Is it I wrote both. Is it Bartholomew or Bartholomew? It's Bartholomew, right?
It's me, yeah, M-Y.
It's you. But he didn't make it in time. He lets you heal. This is kind of the point of no return. He heals you. He lets you save.
He's kind of your Pokemon rival, since we're continuing this Pokemon theme. If the game was more fleshed out, you would like to think that you would have met him as many times as you met Shannon, since you're embarking on the same quest to catch all of the elements on the way to finding out who your real dad is.
Yeah, the paternity quest. That's what we're doing. Yeah, there's no universe where this game gets fleshed out that Leonardo does not play a bigger role. Like visually alone, all of the cues tell us like he was supposed to be something. But right now he just serves as a last bastion, like a save and a restock your health. Before you meet your father, I mean your dad, he's slumped over, and who is standing in front of him but Shannon, of all people? Pops will tell you that it's a trap and that Shannon is an evil puppet, and he's not exaggerating. She admits this willingly. Here's what she says to you. She says, "Brian, you've gotten this far. If you keep going forward, you'll find your quest." Which I hate that line so much. "Then my job will be over. I am a puppet made only for the purpose of leading you. I went out among the people so that I might lead you. I knew nothing of the real world and its foolish people who are doomed to die. But why are humans so strong? With all of their grief, sorrow, happiness, and anger, why do they shine so brightly? the warmth of fire, the winds in the fields, the miracle of water, the abundant harvests. For all these, they give their thanks with prayer. Tell me, Brian, is that what life is about? I'm a puppet, and I just don't understand. I am not of the human spirit. Sorry to complain. I wrote a parenthetical, LOL. If you have the book and the magic stone, this key will open the Gale, which is a typo in the game. That should be the goal, I'm pretty sure. This comes out of fucking nowhere, dude. Like, she's beginning to muse on the human condition, not to mention says sorry to complain, which actually got a laugh out loud from me. But, like, why are they hiding this stuff within, like, man, this is the game. I don't care about traveling and beating Shilf and Guilty. Like, this is the stuff that I want in this story, and they've taken it away from me.
But you found it, unlike some people. This is the gate that we talked about, though. You have to talk to Shannon here. And you'd think you would, since your whole quest was to look for your dad. And then Brian barely acknowledges his dad. He's like, okay, Mr. Bart. Because that's how you acknowledge your dad, who's definitely your dad. Yeah, no, you're right. I wish, like, this kind of thing, the Shannon lore, is why she's one of my favorite characters and one of my favorites to jam into internet pictures. There's good stuff here near the end, but we are really hitting the peak of good stuff, because not a lot of the good stuff happens after this.
No, this ending is not terrific. She hands you the Eltail book, which was striking to me. She just gives it to you, and Brian then moves into Mammon's world. It's a sort of like, it's your nether realm. But again, it's a series, it's literally a series of paths amidst a backdrop. It looks like something somebody drafted in Blender and said, like, yeah, we'll make this pretty later. It's functional, but not a great final area. Mammon, we run into Mammon, the person that we learned about maybe 2 hours previously, is the final boss. A large fiendish sort of devil, some bat DNA in there. Mammon, this is interesting. A lot of the times what I'll do is I'll just Google a name or a word if I'm unfamiliar with it, and I was like, I've heard Mammon before. Why do I know this? Mammon is a term that appears in the Christian Bible, and I'm sure other religions, but it's a representation of greed, particularly the greed that's born of wealth, that sort of debases and corrupts one's spirit. And from Christ's famous Sermon on the Mount, he says, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." So this is like, this is JRPG as they come, right? Like lifting straight out of the Bible here. Xenogears. This is such a cool concept, and they're showing us that they have the ingredients. They just didn't or couldn't put it together in a gumbo that would have been amazing, right? Like, they had the sauce. It's just they couldn't implement it. It's a shame.
You're not wrong, and a lot of the themes are here. So Mammon is the brother of hell that represents greed, whereas you've played through an entire game that is a socialist utopia with no greed and unlimited hand-me-downs every town you go in, and everybody is friendly and welcoming. There's no money, and then your last boss is the literal brother of hell that epitomizes greed and capitalism in this world. So they were playing with stuff. They had the sauce, they had the fire. Too many hands in the chili to get it out before the Zelda 64 main course, I guess.
Yeah, it's you hear them putting in poetic language about the human condition, musing about the human condition. You have a character that, for all intents and purposes, lacks a soul and is asking, which she'll do in a moment, what it means to be human. And then you have this biblical epitome of sort of humanity's downfall, the dredges of humanity, and you are fighting to vanquish it. There is a good story in here. There are good themes in here. And there's something to be said about asking the readers, the players, the viewers to extract their own meaning out of it. But you have to set them up for success. And I think the problem is that I don't think it was because they were inept or couldn't do it. I think they just weren't able to implement it in time, or for whatever reason, they just didn't get to it. They didn't set us up for that kind of success. So we see the trappings of what could have been, and ultimately are left to wonder about this thing that, could have been fairly compelling. And instead, it stumbles, it trips and it falls, and it gets blown out of proportion, and it now lives in infamy as this shitty game, when the truth of the matter is, it's not that it's shitty, it's Star Wars Episode 1 or 2. It could have been so much more. It just had a lot working against it, and it's just a shadow of a whisper of what it could have been. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling a lot in this. I don't think I'm being discharitable with this.
No, you're totally right. And like you said, you're hit with all of this within a matter of 25 minutes. So from the point that Shannon starts extrapolating all over what little plot was happening in the game to defeating Mammon, that's it. That's your arc. That's the beginning to end. And in the North American version, it is literally some words and end after that.
Yeah, defeating Mammon is really uncinematic. He just sort of fades out of existence. Like, you get the same little victory music. Da 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 da. He fades out just like any other enemy. He gets a dialogue box where he just says, like, ooh, ah, ooh, he's taking poison damage. And he says, this cannot be, and he's gone. Shannon, and this is, again, talk about the traces of something interesting. Shannon is allowed to exist even though she was a puppet tied to him, a husk. She is allowed to exist on her own, and she plans to go off and find humanity, thanks to you. That could have been implemented in a way that choked me up, but it's not. And it's a shame. It's really a shame, because she could have been an amazing character. But the game sort of fizzles out like a disappointing firework rather than the triumph that it could have been. It's a shame. And it's not a bad game. It truly is not. I am perhaps getting ahead of myself a little bit. The game ends here. You get an ending scroll that perhaps I'm being a bit reductive. Please correct me if I'm off base here, Mike, but you get an ending scroll that essentially just says you live happily ever after, all is well. Correct.
And I did send you a link, but I didn't expect you to open it and indulge yourself. But in we talked earlier about
Yes, hang me out to dry in front of the listeners, Mike. I love it.
The Japanese version does.
No, does
have a longer ending. Yeah,
you are right. The day that we were recording this was particularly stressful on my end. I did not get around to this. By all means, I feel like I've talked over you quite a bit in this episode. If you want to talk a little bit about the Japanese ending, I would love to hear it.
I won't read all the text boxes, but it ends up being, I think it's like 80 or 90 text boxes more than what you got from Shannon here. You get a little bit of Leonardo talking to Mr. Bart, your dad, about man being gone and that everything is going to be okay between them, and Bart is talking about how, thank you, he was saved by a child. Then you get to see some of the townsfolk. There's a lot of boxes of that. Just generally what is happening after the evil was defeated. Then you get to go back to talk to Leela in another box, talking about the spirits and what we talked about before, that her prayers were met by a master spirit tamer, which is now you. And then you get a little Epona a bit, but then you get Flora, who we talked about before, talking to your favorite King Scottfort about the monsters not running around anymore. Obviously, once again, you're not going to find Flora talking to anybody in the North American version. After being in early development a really important character, she would be in your party. You would be controlling her. So there's Flora. There's the Flora that I promised. And then you get that the Shannon cutscene that we talked about in the North American version, but she's like breaking the fourth wall almost. She's looking directly at the camera and saying all the things about humanity and how she was born from Mammon's wicked heart, and then asking if this was your doing, but what is she going to do? Somewhere deep within my soul, I knew that you would defeat Mammon. What I really wanted was for humans, the genuine beings, to defeat me, the imposter. Mammon envied humans. He wanted their abundant life force and the world they had built, but it was beyond his grasp, and this only enraged him. He may have had great strength and everlasting life, but because of that, he never truly lived. Humans, you are so big-hearted, so full of emotion. You are able to sense the world around you. But now I'm leaving Coutland. I wish to learn more about humans. Shall we meet again someday in a faraway land? Farewell. And in the Japanese version, it's Jean-Jacques is Brian's name. So that's the end of that. But then you get to see Kiliak and Colleen, and then you get that scroll that you talked about in the North American version. But you have a solid 5-10 minutes of other stuff before you get to that.
That ending is so much more effective, I think. Even if it could have been more effective with a better setup, that alone fleshes it out more. This dichotomy between the representation of the goodness of the human soul. This is something that you see in Japanese media a lot, the inherent virtue of the soul of humanity, what it means to be human, and that inherent goodness, that optimism that's within there. Diametrically opposed here with someone like Mammon, the shadow of humanity, right? The dark half, the false side that drags that goodness down and corrupts it, infects it like a virus. You have that dichotomy here. It's not just this big bad that gets introduced at the very end of the game, almost out of nowhere. And then that's not even to say anything about Shannon and how much more effective that dialogue is. It's really a shame. I would be interested. I don't think my Japanese is at a level yet where I could play Quest in Japanese, but I would be interested to try someday. This game doesn't have like a really difficult script. So actually, maybe I could, now that I think of it. Maybe I'm selling myself short. I should give it a try. Have you played is there a fan dub, I'm guessing? Have you played it?
There is not a translation. The community, the speedrun community that does the mods for the game, has been trying to... the translation itself is not the tough part. It's the way that the text is coded in the game has been troubling to re-inject the translated English back in. But I would be excited for you to play it because the ultimate jump scare at the end, which I've been just waiting for this all day, is that Shannon talks about wanting to become human, and then she moves to Detroit at the end of this.
I can't tell if you're fucking with me.
No, this is the precursor to Detroit Become Human, your favorite video game.
Fuck off. God damn it. You got me. You got me good. Fuck. That was good. That was really good. Oh my God. I will say this, no, I'm not going to shit on Detroit. It didn't do anything. It's catching strays.
Yeah, I caught the Red Wing one earlier in the episode too. I was really hoping we weren't going to allude to the ending that I just dumped on you at this point. So
it caught several in the bouncer too. Yeah. Like it can't catch a break.
Yeah.
The bouncer.
Oh man. But that's Quest. Just similar to the bouncer. Is it a truly shitty game? No, absolutely not. Of course, you should never listen to internet reviews, including this one, quite frankly. You should decide for yourself. And as always, the truth is more complex than it seems. This is not a trash game that's bullshit. This has a lot of really cool things in it. The soundtrack, the battle system, the visuals. Like, there's a lot to like here. It's worth trying. Do you need to complete it and talk to every NPC? Well, if you want to, but I think avoiding it just because of its reputation is foolish. There's a lot to like here.
And I promise I didn't pay Rick to say any of this. The precursor to us recording this is I told him I would come on regardless and that he didn't have to enjoy the game. I would be more than happy to talk with him even if he hated it. But luckily the bouncer came first in his schedule. So
Hey, the bouncer is a mess of a video game, but I love it. It sucks, and I think that's awesome.
Well, the episode was awesome too. So.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Truly though, this game isn't. I think I don't want to. We're already 2 hours in. I don't want to go on to another diatribe. I think the trend and the disgusting allure of being negative to fit into this in-group of shitting on something else to feel powerful, to feel elevated. I reject that when it comes to video games, especially because it's so easy to do. That above all else, it's easy, and it's the lazy route to take. It takes no effort at all. There's goodness to find in Quest. Is it, the best game on the N64? Not even close. Is it one of my favorites? No, not at all. Is it an altogether unenjoyable experience? No. It's more, the area is gray. As with everything in life, the area is gray. It's not this black and white, this game fucking sucks, it's trash, you're just, all your account's good for is memeing about a game nobody cares about. No, that's moron speak. It's a fine game if you approach it for what it is. If you approach it expecting Ocarina of Time, Legend of Dragoon, Final Fantasy VII, one of those games doesn't belong in there. If you approach it wanting that, you're going to be disappointed, but that's on you for trying to put a square peg into a round hole. You know what I mean?
Yep, and if only Dave Jackson was here to join us, he would be talking about how some of his favorite games are those 6 and 7 out of 10s, definitely not unlike Parasite Eve and Legend of Dragoon, where they were made for some people, but not all people. But I would always play a 6 or 7 out of 10 that was enjoyable and interesting over a 10 out of 10 cookie cutter RPG that everybody loves just because perfection is perfection. Sad that this game was followed by Ocarina, widely considered one of the greatest games of all time, and came after Final Fantasy VII, widely considered one of the greatest games of all time. But it's okay to be Little Brian 6.5 out of 10. I'll play you, and I'll bastion you forward into 2025.
Yeah, there's a lesson in there. Not the enjoyment is the story that we experience along the way. The story of Quest 64 is not the plot. I Donkey, of all people, said that in a video about Mario. Now I'm just fucking running with it. The story is playing through the game and the joy that you experience along the way. And for a story to be meaningful and exciting and worthwhile to you, the player, it doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10. Not the point of an artistic experience and entertainment isn't chasing perfection. Not everything needs to be Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And it never can be, and that's okay, that's fine. Different moods, different palettes, different days. It's okay. Quest is fine, it's fine. And this was a fun experience. Thanks for coming on and doing this.
The pleasure was entirely mine. Like I have said to you before, I never really wanted to meet my heroes. I listened to a ton of podcasts. It's way harder to come on shows and talk about Quest than it is for me to go on shows and talk about games that I'm not known for championing. The anxiety and now relief I feel from getting through this experience alive is euphoric, Rick. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I usually when I go on dates, that's how they end. They say, the anxiety of having to talk to you was high, and now that it's over, I'm feeling pretty good. Just kidding. But yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. As listeners, as you heard, we will do the Game Boy Color demake / sequel, kind of both, next. That should be the next episode on this show. Looking forward to playing that and comparing it. Probably won't be as long of an episode. I don't know. I can't tell the future, but we'll see how that goes. Until then, if you want to bask in more of Quest 64's goodness, you can always check out Quest 64 Official on, oh gosh, is it just Blue Sky now? Are you still on Twitter?
I haven't deleted my account on Twitter, but I'm definitely not interested in engaging in Elon and Grums and all that stuff right now. So I just kind of left the account in limbo so there's not imposter accounts. But yeah, essentially it's just Blue Sky right now.
Okay. Yeah, you can find links to that in the show notes. We kind of, I don't know, I feel like we kind of danced around your account. How do you describe your online presence?
I guess I'm like a procedurally generated entity that is also the final boss of System Shock 64. And my main goal is to get Imagineer to force me to legally stop talking about Quest 64.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. We were recording this without cameras, so I have no way to gauge whether or not you are a procedurally generated string of ones and zeros. Looks like the joke's on me, everybody. AI is good after all.
That's what
time to up my grind set.
That's what Shannon told you. She's the ultimate AI. I'm just learning from her.
Oh, right. That's the message of Quest 64, is that AI should learn to be human. Of course. How foolish of me. I'm so silly. Yeah, you could check out Quest 64 Official online. It's a funny account, and it's also a heartfelt account. A lot of genuine posting over there as well, but also Quest 64 official posting memes that has got me to Google a disgusting phrase, Quest 64 come, to find a particular meme that I was able to find.
I would say, how did that go? It went well, I take it?
Not all the results were related, but, I found the image I was looking for.
Understood.
You can find that in the episode description. You can find a link to Mike's stuff. You can also find a link to our stuff as well, the Discord, the Patreon, all of our online offerings like Blue Sky and Instagram and TikTok, which, man, I'm just not active on there anymore. But you can find us there, and, you can rate and review the show as well, if you'd be so kind. That always helps us get into Al Gore's rhythm and helps new people find the show. If you'd be so kind, that'd be just swell. But, once again, listeners, thank you for sticking around. Mike, thank you for joining me. Quest 64 Official on Blue Sky on the internets. Check it out. And for now, I think it's time to wrap this. So once again, as always, I am Rick. I'm your host. Happy questing, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.